Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a really special guest. It's Greg from Midlife Cards. He and I did a interview video last month. We really had a great time. I'll put a link in the description to that if you haven't seen it yet. We agreed to start doing this more often, so this is our second one. I'm hosting it, so I apologize ahead of time because I'm probably going to screw something. That was my first time doing it. But I'm super excited to have Greg. We're going to talk about kind of the history of our collecting, how we got into it, and kind of why it's important to us. So without further ado, here comes our special guest.
How's it going?
Good, Greg. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to continue doing this. Again, we talked on that New Year's Eve video about doing this once a month. Here we are in January. Here we are, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. The
Yep.
only complaint I have so far, though, is it feels like the only time that we end up talking is if we're doing a stream together. So we got to fix that. But
Right. We text a lot, but we probably should
yeah.
call every once in a while.
Yeah, it's like family around the holidays. It's like you need a holiday to actually get together. It's like, well, we could just get together anyways.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So
Uh,
cool.
yeah. Super pumped. Super pumped. So, kind of like I said in the intro, we wanted to talk today about the history of our collecting, not so much the history of our current collection. We kind of covered that in previous videos. This is more of when we were kids, what got us into baseball card collecting in the first place, and then kind of taking that through how we kind of left the hobby and then came back into the hobby. So
Well, and
I guess we'll start.
I think we have a lot of overlap too because we both have dads that were collectors.
Yes.
And so, we were getting into collecting and at the same time we had dads that were collecting and we also both have brothers and we
Yep.
both have brothers that collected. So there's a lot of commonality, but at
Yep.
the same time, there's a lot of history there and it's fun to find out how other people really got into it and got started. So let's first off, when did you start collecting? Like what were the first cards you remember buying?
Sure.
How did that all play out?
So when I was a kid, um, I moved to New Jersey when I was in second grade, and my dad's company had season tickets to the Mets back then. So I started going to Mets games. I didn't really know much about baseball, so I started going to Mets games with my dad, my mom, my brother. I started learning more about baseball for that first season that we lived there. And then by the end of the season, I told my parents, "Hey, look, like I think it'd be fun to play." So they signed me up for Little League. I started playing in Little League, and then my dad, he's a huge baseball guy, huge Yankees fan. It probably hurt him a little bit that his company had Mets tickets and not Yankees tickets. But
Hurts me to hear it, but go ahead.
right. So we started talking a lot about, like, that was something we had in common, right? So that we talk about baseball, and he's big into history, so we talk about the history of baseball. So I learned a lot about baseball talking to him. I started playing baseball, so I learned how to play. Like, we go on road trips. This is back in the day where, like, families took vacations. They would drive to go see other family members,
Family
right?
back in the day when families went on vacations together.
Right, exactly. Like, this wasn't when people were like, "Hey, we're flying to wherever." This is, "Hey,
Right.
you know, for spring break, we're driving up to your uncle's house. So we have 3 hours in the car to talk about, baseball." And he would ask my brother and I questions like, who has the highest single season batting average? Who has the highest career batting average? Like, just ask us tons of questions about that. And we learned a lot about that. So I started getting into baseball, and then I started buying packs of cards because my friends collected cards. So I started buying packs of cards, and I think we probably started with that around the same time. Like, I had some 86 tops, but if I think back, I feel like the first packs of cards I started opening were those green 1987 tops cards.
Oh yeah.
So and then I'd buy the packs, I'd open them, sweet, I'd eat the gum. We'd be looking for the big cards in those, right? The Bo Jackson Future Star, bonds, right? So then I started doing that. Then I got into it more, and then the next year I'm like, hey, I really want to try to get that Conseco Donruss rookie. I wanted to get an
Mhm.
84 Mattingly rookie. So I tried to pick those up. I got one of them as a gift from my aunt. So then we started getting more into it. Then we started going to a baseball card shop that was about half an hour from our house. It was the only one nearby. It was like up in the mountains of northwestern New Jersey.
So like
Um,
what grade are you in at this point? Just because I think we're the did you graduate high school in 97?
I did. Yep.
Okay, so we're the same grade at this time. So what grade are you in, you thinking, when you're going to this card shop in a ways away?
Let me think. So second grade, I moved there. Third grade, we went to all the Mets games. Started playing in fourth grade. So probably fifth grade.
Okay.
So yeah, we started going to the card shop, and I'd see super cool cards, and I couldn't afford to buy anything great back then, right? I picked up some stuff. I picked up a 54 Topps Monty Irvin card. I picked up. I liked to buy vintage cards even back then, but I didn't
Mhm.
have anything like nothing epic back then, right? Because I was a kid mowing lawns, didn't get much. um I would get the cool stuff I would get as gifts, right? So one of the cards that I got as a gift, which was my favorite card growing up, and this is not it, but it's the 62 Tops Manager's Dream card. I
Yeah.
had this one, and I had it in the inch thick screw down plastic, right, to
Oh
protect
yeah.
it
We
from.
call them ice blocks out here.
Right. Basically,
Yeah.
yeah, in the ice block. I had it to protect it from basically a hurricane, right?
Sure.
Um,
Right, right, right.
so
Which in
I had
reality,
that.
we were actually damaging the cards because we were squishing them and
Yes.
we were ruining the surface and we were expanding them, and then the cards ended up sticking to them because we didn't use a sleeve and there was no
Yes.
in it was yeah, but go ahead,
And
sorry.
it's funny you say that, because one of the cards I had from back then, we took a trip to Cooperstown when I was a kid, and my father and I, my brother, we walked up Main Street in Cooperstown, went to a bunch of the baseball card shops. I
Mhm,
went into one. I bought like a 1909 mitt, like baseball mitt, the
mhm,
old school with like the individual fingers. None of the fingers were like attached except the thumb and the pointer finger had like the single piece of leather. So I bought that. I'm
mhm.
like, oh, this seems really cool. So we had all of our stuff in the car. So like my dad brought out his glove, my brother brought his glove, a ball, and I put that old fashioned thing on. And then they threw me the ball and I caught it, and it felt like my hand exploded
Sure,
and my
exactly.
fingers bent back. So I'm like, how these guys play back then, right?
Yeah.
So while we were there though on that trip, we went to a baseball card shop, and I bought my first really cool old vintage card. And again, I was on probably like a $15 to $20 budget. So I picked up this exact card. It's the 41 play ball Hank Greenberg. I bought this exact card in Cooperstown on that trip, and it went into the super thick screw down plastic. I
Mhm.
got it back from my parents a couple of years ago, and my biggest fear was when I unscrewed that thing and took it apart, it would peel the front and back of the card off. I
Yeah.
was like shaking. I'm like, oh my God, I've had this card my whole life. I love this card. What's happening? I unscrew it, I lift the top off, and the card just slid right out. I'm like, oh, all right, good. So then I sent it to PSA, had it graded, and now hopefully nothing could happen to it.
I mean, the fact that you still have that card is so cool. Like, where did you keep that card? So you're in, not to move too forward with your collecting, but like during high school and college, like where is that card resting during those years when it's probably not a big priority? Is it just in a box at your parents' house?
It was on. So my parents in their last house, it was outside of Boston. It was in the North Shore of Boston. It was close to the ocean. So basements were pretty much unusable. People had
Mm,
basements, but it's not like you could go like, hey, I'm going to finish the basement, right? That wasn't really a
right,
concept.
right.
So what they did was my dad actually put in the front side of the basement where you could put a sump pump in, he put his memorabilia room, but then like 90% of the basement was just open space. So they built shelving, and my mom doesn't throw anything away. So he built a bunch of shelving to put all of her stuff there. And there was maybe
Right.
like a 5 foot piece of shelf on one of the rows. And it was like rows, it was like a library. It was just like shelves of junk. And then there was
Yeah.
like a 5 foot stretch of one of them where they put all of my brother and my old baseball cards that were, either in boxes or in the screw down plastics or whatnot. So it lived there for a long time. And then when I got back into collecting, my parents sent me that. And then my dad collected at the time too. He collected from when I was probably, I don't know, maybe ninth grade through when I graduated college. I
Hmm.
didn't collect then. That's when I first started working. I was buying like Discman and CDs and,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
going out to Chili's with my buddies for like chips and salsa, right? Like
Oh yeah,
that's when I thought
chips
I
and
was, you know,
queso
I was a
at
big
Chili's.
baller,
It's chips and queso at Chili's. That stuff's ridiculous.
right? And it was all you
Yeah.
could, it was the chips were, you know, the free refills. So we're like, sweet. So that's what
Oh
I
yeah.
spent my money on. So I stopped collecting when I, you know, was probably like 13, 14. But when I got back into it, he sent me stuff and he sold his collection. It was kind of funny. I collected when I stopped collecting, he started collecting, then he
Mm,
stopped collecting, and then I started again, right? So
mm.
it's, you know, and right now we're both collecting, which is kind of fun. But when he sold his collection of stuff, he picked some things to give to me. And
So when
one of
he
the
so he sells off his collection in like a giant lot
yeah,
in
in
a
an
in a
auction. He auctioned it off, and it wasn't cards. He had some cards. The majority of it was memorabilia. But one of the
do you
cards he
think
had, he
that well
bought with me at the card store in Cooperstown when I bought that 41 play ball Greenberg. He bought a 41 play ball Ted Williams, and this is
wow.
the actual card also. So I had that graded. Like all the cards he gave me were ungraded. I had them all graded because I wanted to protect them. They're all low grade condition,
Yeah.
but they're very nostalgic for me, so I wanted to protect them. So, but yeah, so for me collecting, yeah,
Pause. So hold on a second.
yeah,
So your dad's not you're collecting and you buy the Greenberg. Your dad at this point isn't really collecting, but he starts collecting later, but he bought the Ted Williams on the same Hall of Fame Cooperstown trip. So
correct.
it was sort of one of the earlier things in his collection.
Yes, so he bought that. That was kind of one of the first cards that he had in his own collection as an adult
Okay.
because he was the same thing. He
Okay.
collected as a kid too,
Yeah.
and that heartbreaking, right? He tells me about, yeah, my buddy had a 52 tops manual. He'd stick it in the bike spokes. I'm like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
throw up, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Now,
that was like the first card he bought when he got back into it. Not really back into it. He bought it because he thought it was cool. Like he was with his boys, so he bought it, and then he started collecting probably 4 years later. He started.
so when you go to this old Cooperstown shop and you buy the Greenberg and your dad buys the Ted Williams and your brother's there, is your brother older or younger?
2 years younger.
So did he buy anything or was he not really into it or did he buy the pack of 89 tops?
He was less into I think he was less into the vintage stuff. He
Okay.
probably, if I recall, he probably bought packs.
Yeah.
He wanted all he wanted, even back then to now, all he wanted were Ricky Henderson cards.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that's because right at that time Ricky Henderson was a Yankee
Yes.
and you
Yep.
guys are Yankee fans.
Yeah, and he loved Ricky Henderson. He thinks even today, like when I'm doing my countdown video, my
Yeah,
top 50
yeah,
players.
yeah.
I haven't gotten to Ricky Henderson yet. He's coming up pretty soon. He's insisting that I'm gonna bring him on to that. And I'm hesitant because he will argue the entire time about why Ricky Henderson is the greatest baseball player of all time, including Babe Ruth.
Well, if you ask Ricky Henderson, I think he'd agree.
He would agree. I
Uh,
know. So there's two people that think that.
well, there's three: Ricky's mom, Ricky, and your brother.
Yes. Okay. Good point. Yes.
No, Ricky Henderson. Actually, there's a local card show that has a couple of big signers coming up in it's like March or something, February, March, and Ricky's signing. And I've been thinking, man,
Nice.
I might want to get a Ricky autograph. Just if
Yeah.
anything, so I could have 30 seconds in front of him and just because he's such a character. I
Yeah. He
mean,
is.
he's something else. So,
And he's
okay, sorry. So I had
no,
to
but
pause
he's
because there are some things in there that I was curious about.
no, absolutely. Yeah. He's so, that's funny though, is he's still so strong. We at the national
Oh,
this last year, one of my good buddies came with, and he used to work for Reggie Jackson. So he
mhm.
knows Reggie. So he was, when Reggie got there to do signing, my buddy went like into the area where where the signers kind of hang out, like the lounge
Yeah.
before they go out to sign. And he saw Ricky Henderson. So he went over to say hi to him. And I saw him later then. I'm like, how you doing? He goes, I think Ricky broke my hand when he shook it. I'm like, really? He's
Wow.
like, yeah. He goes, he's still strong. He's still a strong guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he played a long time partly because he was in such good shape.
Mhm.
I mean, you could see, I mean, just look at his legs, his hamstrings and his quads were insane.
Yeah, he played 25 seasons. I think in his last season, he still had like, you could still see the like like his quad like
Yeah.
muscle striations through his
Oh, yeah.
pants.
No, I mean, yeah. And that you're about to take me down a rabbit hole I'm gonna stay away from, but so go back. So you go to Cooperstown, you buy your first big vintage card, like,
Mhm.
and your dad buys his one of his first kind of vintage, cool vintage cards.
Yep.
And again, we're in like 5th grade or so.
Yeah,
And then
probably.
and you have the local card shop that you're starting to make trips to,
Yep.
and and that's kind of where you're at that point.
And that's where it went. And then I might buy a card at the card shop like maybe once or twice a year. And
Mhm.
I had a couple cool cards. I had a 54 Monty Tops Monty Irvin. I had a couple other cards kind of like that. I think I had a Hoyt Wilhelm as well,
Mhm.
but I couldn't afford anything like really cool. So then at that point, I started getting more into opening packs.
Mhm.
So I was buying packs of cards. My mom would buy my brother and I for our birthdays and stuff. She'd buy us complete sets. She started the first time with like the Tops traded set, so like the little box,
Yeah.
and then we did that a couple times, and then and I remember in 1989 was the big one. She bought us a complete set of the 89 Upper Deck,
Mhm.
which was super cool. But yeah, but I mean, other than like the packs and stuff, and like I would get any card I had that was vintage that was good was a gift, right? So when I got the manager's dream card as a kid, that was a gift from my parents. I think it was for my birthday when I was probably 12, maybe.
Wow.
But yeah, so I had these cool cards, but then I got out of collecting when I started working when I was or just before I started working. So maybe when I was 15, I stopped collecting. I moved to Colorado when I was 15. So all my buddies, we didn't have like our buddy at the local card shop anymore. So I just kind of got out of it. And then I started working and spending my money on other stuff and was basically done with collecting until, pause,
So
20 years,
what age would that have been then when you kind of got to your pause?
probably 13, 14.
Okay. So you're getting manager's dream cards at 12, and then a couple years later you're kind of on pause because you're saving up for the next Chili's run.
Exactly. I'm saving up to go do stuff with my friends. I wanted to buy a
Right.
mountain bike. I
Yeah.
wanted to, but it was funny is the other thing that kind of coincided with that is I played little league up until I was 13. When I finished
Mm,
my age 13 season, I stopped playing baseball and I stopped collecting baseball cards. And honestly, I stopped watching baseball. I mean, I would I'd watch the World Series and stuff, but I'd stop watching baseball, during the regular season. I would go to games still when like people had tickets and would invite me because it was fun. But
mhm.
I kind of got out of baseball for a while, and I think in hindsight I do regret that. But I got out of it for a while, and then I got back into it. Pause. I got back into it. Later in life. So that's
And
kind of like my kind of intro piece. So let me ask you, Greg. Let's talk about your first phase one of Greg's baseball card collecting.
well, my I didn't go from 0 to 100 to 0. I kind of phased in, and then I was all in, and then I phased out, but I was always still involved. I was
Okay.
never like not collecting, but my intro to it started. I mean, the very first cards that I started collecting actually were not baseball cards. The first cards that I remember having were like, I definitely had Garbage Pail Kids very early on. I think it was second or third series Garbage Pail Kids, which is like 86. Oh, there you go. Who is that? It's
It's
Staring
me,
Darren.
the Staring Darren.
I have I have right here. Hold on. I'm gonna disconnect.
Nice.
My wife's name is Megan, and so I have on the on the thing there. I bought her this at a show the other day. I bought
Nice.
the mug and Megan. I have the Atom Bomb in a 7, I think, which I bought like 6 months ago.
Oh, nice.
I have all those from my childhood. I still have them.
Nice.
They're kind of beat up. And then at a show, about a year and a half ago, a guy was selling packs for like of series 3 and 4. And I bought
Oh,
some
nice.
packs because I'm like, these were the years that I collected. So I bought 4
Yeah.
packs from him for like $15, and I opened them, and so I have those, and those are like, nines, except some of them are off center. Um, and then the other thing I collected really early on is I was like a huge Olympics guy. I still am a huge Olympics guy, but as a kid, I was like the 1984 LA Olympics just completely took over my life for 2 weeks. And it was not long after the Tops made that like set of Olympics cards, and it went all the way back where it had Wilma Rudolph's and you know Jesse Owens and Cassius Clay, all the way up to Mark Spitz and stuff. So it's like you had a little of everything in there, and I collected those early on, but that wasn't baseball cards yet. That was kind of uh, before I was really doing baseball cards, and then a couple things happened. First thing that happened was for Little League, because I played. My brother was older than me; he's 2 years older. So like I saw him play t-ball, and I'm like, I have to do that. So
Mhm.
like I would like practice with his team and be playing catch with my dad on the during the game, and it's like by the time I got to t-ball, like I was able to do a lot of the skills because I had been doing them for 2 years,
Nice.
and so I got all in on that. And then after T-ball out here, at least it's called farm. So you
Mhm.
go 2 years at T-ball and then farm league. And in farm league, they had a thing at picture day where they gave you a little like clipboard with like an info sheet, and you'd write down some questions. So it's like, what's your height? What's your weight? What's your favorite team? What's your favorite player? And I'm like, I remember being at the school. It's Sierra Vista Elementary School in Vacaville, California, and that's where the pictures were. Picture day for all the teams. And I remember going out with the clipboard to my parents outside and asking them to help me fill it out, and they'd ask me questions and write stuff down. And because they took one of the pictures and made it into a baseball card, so the one of one Greg Miller,
Nice.
first Greg Miller card is right there in '87. I was on the A's, and then on the back had all my info, right? All my stats and stuff. And I'll see if I could put it up there. But so I
Nice.
was on the A's. I was 4 foot tall, 4 foot flat. Didn't know my weight, I guess. I had my birthday on there, 7/27/79, age 7. And then favorite pro player, Greg Nettles. Favorite pro team, New York Yankees. And so I got this and I was like, that's kind of cool. There's like cards for baseball. Like, this is cool.
Mhm.
And then right around that time, my parents split up. And when my parents split up, one of the things that you immediately realize as a kid is you need two of everything,
Right.
right? You need two beds, two mattresses, two dressers, and one of the things we needed two of is my brother and I both needed a bike, like, because as a kid, that's your transportation.
Right.
So we went on a Saturday around town, and we looked in the newspaper at all the garage sales in town, and we were going to the garage sales trying to find a bike for my brother. And one of the houses that we were at, and I still remember where it is. I mean, I don't know if I could drive exactly there, but I remember the house in the court, and I know the neighborhood in town. It was on the other side of town. And we pull up looking for a bike, and there was a table, and on the table were a bunch of baseball cards. Like, there was like a plastic bin with a bunch of cards. And the thing that blew me away was they had a binder and they had pages. And I'm
Nice.
95% sure that this is the exact binder. Um, it If that's not the case, then I got that binder within a year, because the binder that I bought was like, but I'm almost positive that was a binder, but I'm not 100% sure, because I'm not 100% sure when that binder came out. But I've had this binder ever since. So in
Nice.
the first year of my collecting, and I think it's that one, and in it came a few cards. There were a few 86 Tops cards in there of just, nobodies and stuff. And the thing that was cool about it is I had pages to put cards in.
Yes.
And so the custody that my parents had, I was at my dad's house every Friday, And so on the way home from school every Friday, my dad would give us a dollar. We'd go into 7-Eleven. I would go to the counter and I would buy 4-packs. And it started where the 4-packs were Garbage Pail Kids. And then after like 1986 and the Garbage Pail Kids, it was like between seasons or series, I guess they are. And all of a sudden, right after I got this binder, it was all of a sudden I noticed that there's 87 Topps baseball cards. And I now have a baseball card, right, that I showed you. And now I've got the binder to put the cards. So I started buying 4-packs every week because they're $0.25 each. And so I'd open my packs, and the chase card was the 87 Topps Mark McGwire.
Yeah.
And so I'd open my 4-packs, no McGwire. And the second best card for me would have been the Don Mattingly because he was the best Yankee at the time. So I never got a McGwire week after week after week, never got a McGwire. And finally, I think it was a Christmas that year. I got some money for Christmas or something. My grandpa would give us some money. And I finally just said, I'm going to buy a complete set because then I know I'm going to get the McGwire.
Yep.
So the closest mall was the next town over. I bought a complete, factory set. It was lime green outside box with pictures of the cards on the outside of it.
So like this color?
That color. And because those were the packs. But it was the factory set. And I bought the factory set so I could finally get the McGwire. Because you couldn't go on eBay. There was no eBay. There was no online. There was no card shops that I even knew existed. There were no card shows that I knew existed.
Right.
So the only way to make sure I could get the McGwire was to buy the whole set. So I bought the whole set, I raced home, went through the whole thing until I finally found the McGwire to make sure the McGwire was in there.
Nice.
And yeah, so that was really when it blew up for me. And then as a kid, I had like a bunch of like dental and orthodontal work done. And I was on the way to an appointment. And when we were taking the turn to go to the street for the appointment, I see in this little strip mall that had like three businesses in it. One of them said Cards and Cards Sports Cards. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like there's a shop. And the only thing they have are sports cards. This is insane. And my mom was driving me to that appointment. I just like begged her, please, afterwards, can we go to the shop? She's like, yes, if they're open, we can go to the shop. And so after the appointment, we went in and we were only there for like 10 minutes. But like, I could not wait to go home and tell my brother that there was this baseball card shop. And it had cases, and it had one of those things where you press down the button and the thing like rotates, and it has like all the different ones and they kind of swing a little bit. It had all that stuff, and I was just like enthralled. And then a few months later is when cards were really starting to blow up, and literally directly across the street, another shop open. I mean, literally, you could look out the window and see the other directly across the street, like 30 yards from each other, is another shop, which actually is somehow still there and open, called the Boys of Summer. And so, we'd ride our bikes down and we'd go to one and then go to the other one, and then they'd be talking about each other, and so that's when it really blew up for us, was at that time.
Nice.
And then after that, it was like, well, what's next now? Like, we want more than just these two shops. And at this point, my dad was not collecting. It was my brother and I. My brother was a big pack ripper. I was a singles guy, which made the card shop even better.
Right.
Because I didn't have to keep opening packs. I could just buy the one card that I wanted.
Right.
And so then it was like, kind of like, what's the next phase? So then we started hearing, there are card shows, and we're like, well, how do you know about a card show? Like, because again, there's no internet.
Right.
And it's not like if there's a card show in Sacramento, which is 40 minutes from where I grew up, they're not advertising in my little town. So in the back of the Beckett magazines, so the old Beckett's, right? In
Yep.
the back, and I have this one. I had all the Clemens ones. This one's from
Nice.
'86, I think. And yeah, August '86. In the back, they had the calendar, and the calendar had a list of all of the shows that
Yep.
were upcoming, and they were by date. And so we would start to see, oh, look, there's one in Sacramento at the Holiday Inn.
Yep.
Oh, look, there's one in Hayward at the Embassy Suites or whatever. And so we started, Dad, please take us to a card show. And so we started going to card shows. And then once you get to the card show, then they start talking about the other card shows. And so I was really lucky because in Northern California at that time was kind of a hub of collecting and major card shows. So
Oh yeah.
one of the biggest card shows in the nation at the time, and in fact, a couple of the nationals took place in San Francisco back then, was there was the Moscone Center in San Francisco, and this is a huge facility, and so we went to the Moscone Center Labor Day. It was Labor Day weekend every year.
Mm-hmm.
And at the Labor Day weekend show, like the first or second year we even knew about it, we literally got there an hour early, and we were the first people in line.
Nice.
Like it was my dad, me, my brother, and then a family that we were friends with went with us, and we were the first people in line. And I remember walking in and looking, and the high ceilings in this huge room, and they had an autograph area.
Nice.
And they had, all night. It was just like, Gaylord Perry signing now at, this station, Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks. You'd look over and there's Harmon Killebrew over there signing, and Al Kaline. And it wasn't hidden. It wasn't curtained off. It's like you could just go over and just like, so I'm over there like with my little camera with a little flash, like taking pictures of these guys and stuff. So one of the things that got me aware of those guys was my dad is kind of a history/baseball guy. And so he would talk about them. But then I started seeing them at shows. And at this point, this is like 1988 now.
Okay.
So I'm in, I don't know how that makes me 9. So I'm in like 4th or 5th grade. And one weekend, this is crazy, but I think it was the second Labor Day weekend show, and it was either it was 89. The weekend of the show, so my brother became a big Darryl Strawberry fan, okay? And I became a huge Roger Clemens fan because the year after I was on the A's, right, I was on the Red Sox. I was on my Little League team was the Red Sox, and I was the pitcher. So I was pitching, and I start, looking on TV, watching TV, starting to collect cards, and there's this pitcher on the Red Sox, and I'm like 8 or 9, so knowing that the Red Sox and Yankees are rivals at that point wasn't, I wasn't at Yankee Stadium and saw the blood, I just knew I was on the Red Sox and I was a pitcher, and there was this other guy on the Red Sox, he was a pitcher named Roger Clemens. So I became he was really good. And I became a huge Clemens fan, like huge, to the point where every time he pitched in Oakland from about 89 to about 95, every time he pitched, I went to the game.
Nice.
So I've seen him pitch a bunch of times.
Nice.
But the weekend of the Labor Day weekend show, this is crazy. The weekend of the Labor Day weekend show, the A's were in town and they were playing the Red Sox. And the Giants were in town, and they were playing the Mets.
Okay.
And Darryl Strawberry was signing at the show, and Roger Clemens was signing at the show.
Oh, wow.
And the odds of all of that happening, because the two teams are right there, in the Bay Area, is insane. But somehow, both of us, our favorite player was signing.
That's so cool.
And so we bought tickets. I met Clemens. He couldn't have been cooler to me. He saw me because I had a Red Sox hat on, even though, we're Yankee people. But at this point, I'm so all in on Clemens. It's like, it doesn't even matter. I have a Roger Clemens shirt on. You remember those old caricature shirts?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I had one of those caricature shirts of Clemens, and he sees me. And again, this is 89. So I'm 10. I reach out, shake his hand, and he's like, "Here, come around the table." He's like, and he looks over to my dad. He's like, "Dad, want to get a couple pictures?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So
Nice.
I come around the table and I come next to him, and he sits there and poses, and we take a couple of pictures. And he was like so sweet to me, and it
Nice.
was like it was just such an awesome experience. And so, long story short, that that Labor Day weekend show went on every year for like the next, I don't know, 15 years.
Mhm.
And so that was the big show. So we'd go to the little Holiday Inn shows and we'd go to different shows, but you'd save up all summer for that show at the end of the summer.
Nice.
And then in sixth grade, we had to do a biography project, and I read my biography on Ted Williams. So
Nice.
then I completely fell in love with Ted Williams. And in Sacramento at the convention center, there was in fifth grade, Mantle was signing for $20.
Oh, nice.
And so my dad bought me, my brother, and him a Mantle ticket. So we all got Mantle signatures. My brother and I got him on a ball. My dad got him on a photo. And then that same show the following year for $39, Ted Williams was signing. And this is right after I had read his book, and I'm
Sure.
all in on Ted Williams. So I asked for an early Christmas present if my dad would buy me the autograph ticket. So I got the American League ball at the time, and I got it signed by Ted Williams. And I obviously still have those balls.
Nice.
And then, at that point, right in about fifth grade, I remember being at the San Francisco show, and my dad comes walking up to me with this big old smile on his face. And I'm like, because I just, I was a kid, I'd get in there and I was off. I was all
Mhm.
over the place.
Mhm.
And my dad would just kind of hang out until the show was over and then bring us home. And I look over, he's got this big old smile. And I remember this like it was yesterday too. He's walking up the aisle at me, and I look up and he's got a stack of stuff, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, I'm putting together a 1960 Yankees team set,
Oh,
all
nice.
the Yankees from 1960. And I go, "Oh, wow." So he shows me the stack, and the cards were beat up,
Mm,
but he's got like, he had most of the Yankees at that point, and he bought a mantle. He bought the
nice.
1960 mantle, and I want to say he paid like $100 for it. And at that point, my dad was completely hooked immediately.
Nice.
And the Yankee team set went from the Yankee team set to the full complete 60 set. And the reason he picked the 60 set is because when he collected as a kid, it was really the 58, 59, and 60
Mhm.
sets that he collected,
Mhm.
because he was born in 1950. So he was 8, 9, and 10, the
Right.
same ages that I was starting. And so he went all in on the 1960. I mean, like all in
Nice.
on the 1960 set.
Nice.
And so I would always go to the Labor Day weekend show, even like through high school and stuff. But at that point in high school, my dad was more into collecting than me. I was still into collecting, but I was more into it. I'm sorry, he was more into it in high school, but I would still go to that show. And then the Cow
Sure.
Palace, which is kind of near where Candlestick Park used to be, they'd have a big show. And so I'd go to the big shows with him, but I wasn't I wasn't like getting into the eBay stuff, which was
Right.
really starting to kick up here now in about 96 or 97.
Yep.
Um, so he started that's when PSA really started taking off, and that's when eBay started taking off. And he started seeing the prices of what stuff was going for. So he was like, I got to get my stuff graded.
Sure.
So he graded everything and then was upgrading, upgrading, upgrading. And his 60 set ended up with a PSA 8 average.
Ooh,
Um,
nice.
his mantle was he had a PSA. It's a long, I'll tell you the story, but it's kind of it might take us down a rabbit hole, but he ended up with a PSA 9 1960 Mickey Mantle.
Nice.
And he doesn't have it anymore. But then the prices got so high, he's like, I can't afford to keep these cards.
Mm,
Like, I have to sell them because you also have to remember he's a single parent,
Mhm.
and so I'm about to get into college. My brother's about to get into college. Or my brother was in college at that time now, and it was like he just was like, "Yeah, I
Mhm.
gotta sell them, and then I'm just gonna collect the players that I like." But he's like, when a PSA 8, which there was a pop of 2 of some
Mhm.
common is selling for $300 in 1998, you kinda gotta sell it.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
and so he did.
Yeah.
And, his mantle, I've never told this story. I'll tell it. I don't think I've told this story, but I'll tell it. So, and I know I'll mess it up, but so my dad he had a really nice ungraded mantle, and there was another guy that he knew who had a really nice ungraded mantle, but it was like perfect.
Mhm.
And my dad said, "I'll trade you mine and $100 for your better one."
Right on.
And the guy did it. And so my dad had this one that was like, I mean, it was like perfect. And so at that Labor Day show, what used to happen was they would have on-site PSA grading.
Mhm.
So he brought in the mantle for on-site PSA grading, and he puts it in, goes back the next day, and they gave it a trimmed grade. And he's like, "This card is not trimmed. What are you talking about?" So he went in and he complained to him, and like face to face. "What are you talking about? This look, he had other cards. Look, it's the same exact size. It's the same size. Like it's
Mhm.
not trimmed. It's not smaller." And they said, "We think it's trimmed." So, and my dad says, "Why do you think it's trimmed?" He goes, "Because corners don't come that sharp."
Oh, come
Their
on.
evidence of trimming from PSA was corners don't come that sharp. So the next Labor Day weekend show, he brings it in again, brings it in for on-site grading. They say, I mean, if Nat Turner watches this video, he's going to file a cease and desist order on me. But
Right.
here we go. I'm in at this point. So what then happens is he brings it in and they send it, say it's trimmed, but they said this time the other edge is trimmed. So instead
Mhm.
of this edge is trimmed, it's the other edge. And he's just like, "No, it's not. It's not trimmed. This is ridiculous." So he's mad again, but they claim it's trimmed. He says, "Hey, look, it's the same size. What are you talking about? It's trimmed. We believe it's trimmed. It's too nice."
Mhm.
So then, if memory, and I know I'm messing up a little bit of the details, but there was a show in L.A. that my dad went down to, and at this point, my dad is a well known collector of '60s, where all the big dealers he'd walk up, they'd go, "Hey, Mike, here are my new 1960s," and hand him the
Mhm.
stack, and he'd go through the ones that he wanted because they knew him because he had been doing this now for like 10 years.
Sure.
So he goes down to the LA show and he goes, "Yeah, I got my mantle. I wanted to submit it again, but they keep saying it's trimmed." And his buddy, who's a big time dealer, says, "That car's not trimmed. Like it's full size. It's just super nice. It's like perfect."
Mhm.
He goes, "Let me submit it for you." So my dad goes, "Okay." So this big time well known dealer who's sending in tons and tons and tons of cards to PSA and is well known by PSA submits the card for on site grading, and it comes back an 8. It comes back an 8. So now, the can of worms in which we could go with this story
Sure.
right now
Sure.
is, and I can't believe that I'm completely hijacking our conversation about our childhood grading, but
Yeah.
here's the story anyway, right? So my dad says it's in a grade. Now they can't say it's trimmed, and it's an 8. It's a 10, but they've assigned it an 8. I mean,
Right. The
it's
corners are
perfect,
so good, they claimed it's trimmed, but then
right?
when they realize it's real, it's only an 8.
The
Okay.
color on it was unbelievable.
Mm.
And it was perfectly, I mean, it literally is a 10. So my dad goes, "It's in a grade." So that's a huge step. So my dad says, the dealer that submitted it for my dad is furious because it only got an 8. So the guy goes back up to PSA and says, after it got the 8, and says, how is this only a, explain to me the flaws. What is wrong with the card? How did it only get an 8?
Right.
And they said, well, yeah, it is really nice. And he said, tell me what's wrong. Tell me why it's not a 9 or a 10. And so he goes back to in the booth and he's talking with a couple other graders. And right there on the spot, they changed it to a 9.
Jeez.
So now this is great. I mean, this is now, do I have proof of any of this? I don't have receipts, but this is my dad. Like,
right, yeah.
I experienced all of this.
Sure.
He would call me. I was at the shows that came back trimmed. I remember him going up pissed off, showing me the card that they wouldn't grade it, blah, blah, blah. I remember him calling me going, it got an 8. I remember, I mean, this is part of my life story. I don't have proof of, but it happened.
Right.
And now it's in a 9. So it was trimmed, 8, 9. So when people say, you know, grading has flaws, I'm like, you don't need to explain that to me.
Right, you get it.
I'm well
You've
aware. I walked through this whole thing with my dad.
Yeah.
I completely have seen that there are flaws. Now, I could understand why a perfect card that at that time is 40 years old, because this is in about 98 to 2001 that all this happened, you might think, man, this has got to be altered. But it wasn't. I mean, it was full size. There was no evidence. I mean, so anyways, that's an interesting story. And then my dad, at that point, he starts flying to nationals because now he's expanded to his 59s. He's doing a 59 and a 60 set. And he's flying out to nationals. And he literally knew more about every single card, in those 2 sets than any. I mean, like, I was at a show with him the other day, and there was a 59 Topps Eddie Matthews that was like pretty well centered. And he goes, well, you got to buy that because it's literally 1 out of 100 of those is centered. That card is always 90-10 off center. Like, he still knows that set.
Nice.
And like, you could say to him, what's number 83? And he could go, well, it's either this guy or this guy. Like, it's like he knows that set so well.
Nice.
So I went a little past middle school, but that brought me to about when I graduated, 97, 98.
Nice. So
I ran long. I'm sorry, but
no, you're good. So before we jump into like the later part, I figure since this is so nostalgic for both of us,
you're opening a pack.
Open.
Okay, so right now, hold on. If you pull a Mark McGuire,
it's yours.
I am going to freak. I will freak out.
It's yours. So what's funny is I opened a pack of these. I got a box. I opened one yesterday. These were in the same pack. The Roger Clemens All-Star.
Record breaker Clemens.
And the Bo Jackson.
Oh, the Bo Jackson Future Stars.
Both in the same pack. So maybe we get that on this one today.
I think it might be a loaded pack. I think that Topps sent you that box.
Should I chew this? No.
If you don't chew it, do you ever watch Junk Wax Sal?
No.
There's a guy named Junk Wax Sal on TikTok, and he always eats the gum.
So I've chewed the gum a few times. It just disintegrates. It doesn't even get chewy. It just disintegrates. It's gross.
Well, you have no moisture left in your mouth. All right, let's see it. He's going through them.
So
we got Jay Tibbs, Milt Thompson. Oh, Jose Rijo. Remember Jose Rijo?
Yep.
Jim Presley. T.R. Bryden. I don't remember him.
Me either.
Tony Fernandez.
It's a good one.
He's an all-star. He was a part of that big trade with Joe Carter and Fred McGriff. And that trade, Jim Gantner, that trade actually happened Labor Day weekend during the card show. I heard about that on the card show floor of one of those Labor Day weekend shows.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, Jim Slayton. Oh, Mike Greenwell, that's a hit, man.
Yeah,
That was a
Greenwell.
big card there. I got Mike Greenwell's autograph at a card show.
This is his rookie card.
Yeah, that was a big card at the time.
Rob Nepper.
All right, Davey Lopes, Padres leaders.
The Yankees leader, by the way, from that's great because it's Mattingly and Henderson that year.
So wait, stop on this one. So Jimmy Williams, maybe I don't know, 20 years ago, was the manager of the Red Sox.
Mhm.
And there was a big Red Sox fan who had a national radio show, and he said that Jimmy Williams always made stupid mistakes all the time, and so he would have his Jimmy of the week, which was the bonehead thing of the week. That was one of his things. So that's anyway.
Nice.
Jimmy Williams, Von Hayes, not a bad
Not
player.
bad.
Oh, we got our first Yankee though.
Yep. We're not gonna have. I don't think we're gonna get
No McGuire.
No McGuire.
Jose De Leon. Steve Sachs. Steve Sachs is a local guy. He's from the Sacramento area.
Nice.
His brother, I think, just passed away like a year ago, tragically. Yeah.
That was an okay pack. Didn't have any like major stuff.
The Mike Greenwell in 1988, if you pull a Mike Greenwell 87 tops, that's a big card.
I agree. I remember that. I probably got 4 or 5 packs left in my wax box, so we'll save those. We'll save those for next month. We'll see.
Very fun.
The goal is to get one McGuire.
So let me just let me bridge you the gap between 2000 and 2020 for me real quick, and then we'll kind of see how we got more in from there. So during college, I was still collecting cards. Again, I was still going to shows occasionally with my dad. In 2000, 2001, I was collecting a lot of the 81 Donruss golf cards.
Okay.
That there's 81 and 82. 82 has the Fred Couples rookie. 81 is the first big set. And so they had, it was the first major release with Nicholas or Tom Watson or Lee Trevino or any of those guys. And so I was big on those. I bought a wax box and opened it, and I got like 10 Watsons and 7 Nicholases in it because there's only 66 cards in the set. So like you're going to get a bunch of duplicates. So I was big into those. I was buying a lot of ticket stubs over the next, 5 or 10 years. So I got big into Olympic ticket stubs. I had a Reggie Jackson 3 home run World Series ticket stub. I had a Jesse Owens won the 100 meters ticket stub. I still have a few of my ticket stubs, but a lot of them I've gotten rid of. And then I was buying, like, occasionally I would buy like a nostalgia card, like a PSA 9 86 Donruss Jose Canseco I bought 8 or 9 years ago. But the one thing I was always doing still, like at least once a month, is I was always checking the prices on 2 of my Grail cards, which was the Yogi Berra 48 Bowman and the 54 Topps Ernie Banks. No matter what I was doing in life, at least once a month, I would check on each of those card prices to see where they were at. And so I wasn't like out of collecting. I wasn't all in like I was earlier and like I am now. So what then brought you really back in a few years ago?
I came back in so it would have been 2018, November 2018, November 26th, 2018, actually. So we went, my wife, who was at the time we were dating still, my wife, her kids, my daughter, my brother, and at the time, his girlfriend, now his wife, went to Hawaii for Thanksgiving. My parents rented a house, and it was my 40th birthday. So my parents gave me, they said, "Hey, we got you something that we know you've always wanted, and it was always just out of reach. Every time you tried to buy one, it was just too expensive. Do you know what it is?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm hoping it's a 911 Turbo." And they're like, no. I'm like, all right, well, yeah, give it a shot.
Well, they didn't fly the Porsche all the way to Hawaii, did
Right.
they?
So
Now
then,
so when you're done, I want to ask you more about your trip because I might have been on the same island at the same time. Go ahead.
nice. Okay. So then they hand me something and it's, about this big and it's wrapped. I unwrap it and it's my 1968 Nolan Ryan rookie card and a
Wow.
SGC9.
Wow.
So I got that card. I was like, oh wow, I remember this. Like I used to go to that shop in New Jersey and they'd have it every once in a while. And I'm like, oh, it's $80. All right, I've got $60 from mowing lawns. I gotta mow more lawns. Then I'd go back and it wouldn't be there anymore. I'm like, damn. So I'd save up some more and then I'd go and they're like, oh, it's 100 now. I don't have 100. And then I just never got it. And then I got out of collecting and then they bought me that. My dad's like, look, it's really nice when you get into your 40s because of you have stress of the kids getting older and they cost more money and work at that point in your career. You're like solidly into your career at that point and you have a lot of stuff going on and you don't always focus on doing stuff you enjoy. And he made a point of when you get to be that age, it's really fun to do stuff you did as a kid. Like if you really enjoyed it as a kid, you should still enjoy it as an adult. It'll be different, but you'll enjoy it. And so that's cool. So he bought me that Ryan. And then I said, that's cool. So I got home and my wife was like, oh, at the time my girlfriend, but she's like, oh boy, here we go. Darren's a little OCD. We're gonna start seeing boxes of baseball cards. So from that year for the next year, I basically bought this case right here. This case right here. I bought every Ryan playing day card in the highest grade I could afford, other than the 69 because that was too expensive. All the way through his, from 70 through his 1994 tops, right? All his tops base cards. Then for my birthday the next year in 2019, when I turned 41, my parents got me the only card I had left to get, the 69 Ryan. So they picked me up a 69 Ryan. And then at that point, when I finished this case, my wife was like, okay, cool, you're done. And I said, I'm just getting started, babe. So then I started buying cards that I thought were iconic from when I was a kid, right? Mind you,
Sure.
I'm pre-COVID still, which is good. So I
Yeah.
picked up the 54 Hank Aaron rookie. I picked up the 56 Topps Mantle, which is one of my favorite looking cards. I picked up some older stuff. I picked up like a Christy Mathewson T206. I just started picking up cards where I'm like, when I was a kid and I would go to the card shop or the card show with my dad and I would see them, they're the stuff where I'd be like, Dad, come here. You got to see this. Oh my God, look at this.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah.
Right. Then I'm
Yeah.
like, cool, I could afford these now. So I started picking those up. And then I started, one of my buddies was like, hey, do you ever watch YouTube videos of baseball cards? And I'm like, oh, they have those? So I got
So
on YouTube.
this is still like 2018,
This is
2019?
2019.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I started watching videos. And I think the first video, like I just searched vintage baseball cards. And the first video that came up was a Silver Jackify video
Oh, okay.
with his,
I like his channel. I'm
yeah,
subscribed.
he's got cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was his it was his December 2019 top cards in my collection video. So I watched it and I was like, whoa, that's nuts. Like the kind of cards, like the cards that so then I started watching more and more. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you look at these cards. Like I watched Jay Stottlemyre's channel and he doesn't do a lot of videos, but when he does, it's just like, whoa, look at these like old Babe Ruth cards, or I just started watching guys' channels that had these crazy collections, crazy vintage collections, and I'm like, there's so many more cards than I really kind of thought about when I was younger. So then I started buying vintage, and then I got the idea in my head right around the time I started my YouTube channel in 2022, so a year ago. I got the idea in my head of it would be cool to buy a rookie card for the players I could. There's a few not, like Babe Ruth, not going to happen, but be cool to buy rookie cards of like the top players. Like that was kind of my thing. I've been doing that for like probably 2 years now, buying rookie
Yeah.
cards of the top players. And then my wife said, "Hey, why don't you do like a countdown video of hey, here's the top players of all time, and here's their rookie card, with obviously the exception of Babe Ruth and for now Mickey Mantle."
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's a good idea. So I started doing the countdown, and then so that's what made me more of a rookie card collector. Is I got some, and then I'm like, hey, I want to get the rest of these. Um, and then yeah, so then now I'm just kind of back in it, and like we talked about in our last video, there's a few rookie cards still on my list, but I got most of the ones that I was looking for. So now I'm going to focus on other general like iconic cards in the hobby. So it basically went from my parents bought me a card for my birthday just to be like, hey, maybe
Yeah.
display this on a shelf to
Yeah.
thank you. I now need a room in my house to fill with all my baseball cards. So that
But
kind of
what a gift from your dad, because it wasn't just the card, but it was the advice of like, make sure you're doing something for you, and like
right.
sharing that wisdom of, you've gotta make sure that you're doing things for you and you have your thing. And I think a lot of us as parents and husbands, we like, we get so focused on, bringing our kids to things and attending their stuff and doing our duties around the house, that it sometimes, because there's going to be a time that like our kids are out of the house, and if we don't have anything going on, then we're just going to just kind of be sitting there.
Mhm.
And it's such a healthier way, and that's just such an awesome gift that your dad gave you by really bringing you back in. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's
that's
awesome.
so cool.
And it was great because last year was my first national, and I had planned to go. And then my wife was like, hey, you know what'd be really fun is if you invite your dad to go. He'd probably love it. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. It'd be good, just like, bonding time. Plus, he loves baseball. So he and my brother came, and one of my best friends who's way into baseball. He's not way into collecting so much, but he's way into baseball. He came, and yeah, it was so fun. Like we are so excited to go to the national this year because of
Yeah.
how fun it was. Like we walked in and literally like my brother hadn't shown up yet. So we walked in and my buddy kind of veered off. And my dad and I, when you went to the one in Chicago this year, you go in, there's like the main entrance, and then there's two different, well, there's three halls, but we started on the hall to the left. We walked in and there was like um Mile High Card Company had their booth, and they had stuff in the next auction. And I walk in, and literally, like the second card I see on display in the case is a T206 Honus Wagner.
Wow.
And I was just like, whoa. And then it dawned on me, and I pointed out to him, and he's like, absolutely. Going to the National, if you're going to the National and you are a investor, it's one thing, right? If
Mhm.
you're a dealer, it's one thing. But if you're truly a collector and you're truly like into history of baseball, the National is not somewhere you go where you're like, cool, I'm going to buy stuff, which obviously you do. It's like a museum.
Yeah.
Like you walk through these booths. Like we went to the Heritage Auction booth, and they had Lou Gehrig's uniform from his tour of Japan. They had they had a 52 mantle and a 9 or 9.5. It's the one that got auctioned, the one that went for whatever, 12 million bucks. That was on
Mhm.
display.
Mhm.
Um, you just like they had tons of like Babe Ruth game used bats, like Jackie Robinson game used bat, right? You're just like, whoa. So for he and I, it was fun because yeah, we bought some stuff, but it was really more of like it reminded me of when I was a kid when I didn't have any money and couldn't afford stuff. That was kind of how I felt there. It was like, whoa, look at that. Whoa, look at that. Dad, check this out. This is cool. And I was like, this is nice. Like, because we were both, it was literally like 30 years ago,
Yeah.
right? But it was just bigger. And it was
Yeah.
it was it was a blast. And it's gonna be like you're going this year. So it'll be you're gonna yeah, you and your dad are gonna love it. It's so
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. And again, it's so good that, you found again a reignition of that passion, and
Mhm.
it's just something to keep us healthy and doing something positive. For me, it was like politically, I feel like our country has been so divided, and I'm kind of, for a while, I was sort of like uh, political talk radio junkie, and I don't listen to music in the car. I listen to talk radio still. Um, but it was like everything was so negative. I was just like negative, 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 negative. And I stumbled onto a YouTube video, and I think it might have been like Jab's family,
Okay.
and it was at the National, and it was just like I just sat there and watched it for like an hour, and I was just like, it was so much fun, and I was just like this is so positive,
Hmm.
like this is like an escape from the polarization that's going on. And then right around then the COVID thing was firing up about it, and it's like I still had years and years of collecting like knowledge, and it's not like the 62 tops you know set changes,
Right.
and I was a kid that collected vintage cards, and I didn't have a lot of money to do it, but those were the cases I spent the majority of my time, and I'd study them with my dad. I mean, I could tell you even, 5 years ago, every what all the big cards looked like, and
Hmm.
I would look at them online, and I'd study them, but I didn't really have much disposable income to buy them.
Hmm.
But I know about them, and I know about, you know, the 64 Giants, and I know about the exhibits, and I know about the Redbacks, and I've known about all that stuff because I studied it and looked at it, and I'd go to these big shows and I'd learn about them, but I just didn't own many because, I was broke.
Hmm.
I had a stay-at-home wife, and I had two kids, or I was in college, and I didn't have any money. And
Hmm.
so now all of a sudden, I've just I have a little bit of disposable income. I think I mentioned this to you once before. A couple years ago we paid off our house,
Hmm.
and so that frees up a lot of the stress on money when you get rid of your biggest bill.
Right.
And I don't take all my old house money and put it, into cards, but it just allows you to spend, a couple $100 a month on cards and not feel like you're stealing from the family's, food budget. And
Exactly.
so it just freed up my ability to do that. Then my wife went back to work, a few years ago, and so our income went up, and there's just more disposable income. So I'm at a place now where I never was out of collecting, and I was never out of the hobby. I was just really, really low on the actual purchasing part.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
and now I can start to purchase again. And I have. And then you learn things, and you take some stuff that you don't like as much and move it over for this. And then when I was first starting to buy, I was into some of the modern soccer cards,
Hmm.
and I'm a big soccer fan, English soccer especially. And so I was buying a lot of soccer cards, and I was buying a lot of stuff raw, and then I started sending it in, and I started doing really well. I mean, this is the boom. Everyone was doing well. So I started to buy stuff raw, get it graded, sell it, like make, $500.
Hmm.
And then I now had that $500 to go in my pool of money to go towards, the vintage stuff that I wanted. And I like soccer cards still, and I have some, but it was more of like, it's how I started building my war chest,
Hmm.
and then the other thing that happened, and I mentioned this in a video a while ago, I don't know if you saw it, but I had I had all those ticket stubs,
Hmm.
and one of the ticket stubs I had was the gold medal basketball game when Michael in '84 when Michael Jordan was on the team.
Oh,
And
nice.
I bought that ticket stub for like 10 or 15 bucks, and I sold it on eBay for like 2,500.
Oh, wow.
And so I had just made a killing with a bunch of soccer cards. I had this $2,500 seed money from my Jordan ticket stub, and now all of a sudden I had some money to work with, And then, you start kind of moving things around a little bit and trying to scale up a little bit. And then, here and then, my channel is monetized, so they kick me down some money, and it's not been monetized even for a year,
Mhm.
but for the last 10 months or some, it's been monetized. So they send me some, and then all of a sudden you're like, you kind of have some money to play with without.
Mhm.
And again, I have a little bit that I budget. I mean, literally, I take $100 from our monthly budget and it goes into Greg's card account. But then
Nice.
you add that to the money that I made from some other stuff, and then some stuff I sell, and then I'll buy something at a good deal and sell it for a little bit more. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I have a kind of a cool collection, and I'm
Yep.
able to buy the stuff that I've been looking at for years, but haven't been able to own.
And yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Like we did the same thing maybe like 4 years ago. We were able to pay off the house. So then we were able to, so we adjusted the budget a little bit. And basically my I'm in sales, so I get base pay plus commission. My
Hmm.
my base salary goes towards living and investing and retirement.
Hmm.
And 90+% of my commission also does that. But then I get money that I spend on stuff. And the agreement I made with my wife is I could keep doing this until the very first time someone in the family or the family in general needs something. And my response is, "Oh, we can't do that because I just bought a baseball card."
Yeah.
When that happens, I'll have one last YouTube video of, "Hey guys, check out whatever auction. My whole collection is going up for sale."
Yeah.
So that agreement keeps me under control when something is, when somebody sends me a link like, check this out, a 33 Gaudi Lajoie and like a two, they're only asking like $24,000. And I'm like, that's so awesome. I want to keep all the rest of my cards though. So I'm not gonna.
I don't know if a 33 Gaudi at Lajoie went for 22,000, we might have to go and have these, because there'd be a lot of meat on the bone there.
I
We
know,
could
I
just
know.
flip it.
But
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 yeah,
it
I hear you.
but that's yeah, so that's kind of like my thing is we, you know, and like you two, right? You make and when younger guys ask me, right, on the channel or just wherever, hey, I want to start doing this and this. I'm like, look, you need to make the right financial decisions for you have to pay off your debt, get money in there for retirement, do all the right stuff first. Then once you do that, then you could start, you
Yeah.
know, stepping up the collecting budget because you
Yeah.
have the good solid foundation. Because and that's the thing, right? Like you get people comment on my videos sometimes and they're like, "Oh wow, I want to get that card." And I'm like, "Cool, you absolutely should, but don't forego your 401k match.
No.
Don't
Yeah.
forego all these other things that are way more important." And that's the
Yeah.
thing. And like, I love my baseball card collection. I love YouTube. I love the community. I love talking to people about it. But it's still sometimes it feels more than a hobby, but it's still a hobby. And I try to, tell people that when they're like, "Oh, I'm going for this," you know, my wife and I, we could pay the house off, but I've got this money, and instead I wanted to like, no, no, no. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's still a hobby
Yeah.
unless you own a card shop and and that is your job.
Right.
Do buy cards when you are not you can't put yourself in a bad financial spot. So that's kind of like my thing with my wife is as long as I don't do something stupid that impacts the family, I could make reasonable purchasing decisions. So that's kind of like that was a big shift, right? Because up until I started getting back into collecting, it was always, you know, do I have $100? Do I have $50 to go do this? Now it's like, okay, I could do it, but I can only do it when like if something comes up like over the holidays, hey, we spent a bunch on the kids' gifts this year. Guess where that budget comes from, right?
Right.
Card account wiped
Right.
out, right?
Right.
So it's one of those things where it's like, as long as you're doing it intelligently and not, and I think that was hard for people in 2020 and 2021, right? Because they
Yeah.
see the value of stuff going up so much, right? It's like people that jumped into Bitcoin at 40,000, right?
Right.
Like, oh my God, it's gone up so much. I'm gonna get by, and as it keep going up. And I watch videos sometimes, and I felt terrible. Right? They show these younger guys, like in their 20s, like, hey, I did this and this and sold this and took a second mortgage, and I bought a Jordan rookie in the 10 for 700,000. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
this is not going to sustain. And then now it's like, hey,
Yeah.
they're selling for 150.
Yeah.
Sorry, you could have had a house,
Yeah.
but now you have a Jordan card that you overpaid on by 5x, right? Like,
Right.
when I watch those videos, like a lot of people watch those videos and they're like, "Oh my God, that's hilarious," or "Oh my God, awesome buy." And I'm just
Oh
like,
no.
no, no, no,
No.
no, no, no. You're,
Yeah.
this is,
The
it's a hobby.
channels out there who kind of prey on people who have made mistakes or have had bad fortune,
Mm,
like that's not what this is about. Again, I started this whole thing as an escape from negativity. So when people, make their negative comments on my channel or they don't like me or something, which heck, there are times I don't like myself. So I don't blame you if you don't like me sometimes. But it's like we have to just go put it all in perspective and just go, this is meant to be an escape from the
mhm.
negative realities of life. Like my poor bud who's on my lap right now, who I don't know, she might she's down to maybe today or tomorrow.
Oh no.
Those things are what matter, you know.
Mhm,
This is just an escape so that we occupy our mental time from the
mhm.
things that really are stressful. So
100% agree.
hey,
It-
we went an hour and 16 minutes.
Yep.
I've had a blast,
Me
but
too.
and if there's anybody out there who is still listening, I hope that you are, because we've had a blast. And if you're still listening, give us a code in the comments. Say, I was there at the in the comments for in Darren's channel, that you made it all the way to the end and you heard that that's the code. That will be our way of knowing you made it all the way to the end.
That's right.
But as always, my friend, this
Yeah.
is
Thanks, Greg.
a lot of fun. We'll do it again next month, and hopefully, I'll talk to you between now and then as well.
Absolutely.
And but yeah, I love hearing the story about how you got to where you are, and I
Yeah.
love
Same. Your
that.
story is
My
awesome. Like,
biggest takeaway, my biggest warm fuzzy from the conversation is the story about your dad giving you the card, your mom and dad giving you the card, and then your dad's advice about, make sure that you're kind of taking care of yourself and doing some things to enjoy yourself. So that was very cool.
yeah, no, it was awesome. And it was really cool to hear the history of like how you and your dad went to all those shows and just kept
Yeah.
going. That's it's really
Yeah.
fun. And I'll be honest with you, like one of my favorite parts of my collecting is being able to talk to him about what I'm looking to get, what I am
Yeah.
getting. It's awesome. And I know you could relate to that because your dad, you and your dad have a very similar relationship with
Yeah.
the same kind of background on like on collecting. And
Yeah.
it's awesome. It's great to have like friends that are into it. It's great to have the card community, but I think it's like extra special to have, being able to like do it, do the collecting and have those conversations with your dad as well. It's super cool.
With your dad for sure. My dad came by yesterday. He was all excited because he bought a 54 Bowman Mantle,
Nice.
and he brought it over to show me, and it was like, but it's, whoever is listening and whoever is, like the advice I'd given before, like people need card buddies,
Hmm.
because sending that text saying, "Look what I got. This is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about doing this. I just did that." It's like it just the exponential explosion of enjoyment when you have that is
Yep.
very, very cool. And I feel like we have a whole community of people, that I've not even, met before, that
Yeah.
I
It's
share with
crazy.
them and they share with me, and it's so cool.
It's funny, I had a video on my video I just did of my plan for 2024. I had a channel that I hadn't heard of the channel before. He has a
Hmm.
bunch of subscribers. I hadn't heard of him. He hadn't heard of me. He saw my video and he sent me an email and said, "Hey, let's do a collaboration video." I said, "That's
Hmm.
cool." Like and like it's neat. It's such a great community. And I think the key thing, like you said, is It's a hobby that we do for enjoyment. And if anybody that's doing this, anybody that's in this hobby feels stressed by the hobby, email Greg and I, and we'll help figure out why you're stressed. Because if you're stressed, it means you're just not doing something right with it,
Yeah.
because it shouldn't be stressful.
Yeah. It should be the release. It shouldn't be the angst.
Hmm.
Cool.
Awesome,
Hey,
Greg. Well,
buddy.
hey,
All
I
right. Hey.
appreciate it. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and I'll host next month, and I look forward to whatever it is we're going to talk about.
Sounds good, Greg. Have a good
All right,
one.
bud.
Thanks again.
Bye.